The chemistry of calm, neurotransmitters at work. It's surprising that an object as simple as a blanket could have any measurable relationship with what happens inside the brain. The fabric and weighted beads aren't chemical in themselves. They only provide mechanical pressure. Yet that sensation can travel through the nervous system and influence biological signals in ways that correspond with reduced stress and better sleep in some people. Pressure likely nudges neurotransmitter systems in some users, based on small physiologic studies and lab measures. And while these effects are subtle, they point to a fascinating overlap between psychology and neurochemistry. The core idea is that deep, steady pressure doesn't just calm the body. It may help the brain adjust its internal chemistry toward balance. Researchers believe several plausible players are involved. Serotonin is one of them. This neurotransmitter regulates mood and contributes to sleep readiness. Small-scale studies suggest firm, even contact may encourage serotonin activity, which then supports the later release of melatonin, the hormone responsible for signaling the onset of sleep. These changes are not uniform across everyone, but for some, they appear to create a body-wide shift toward calm. Melatonin itself has been directly measured in at least one controlled setting. A controlled lab study reported increased pre-sleep salivary melatonin after using a weighted blanket. Because melatonin is the body's main hormonal signal for night and rest, that finding suggests the blanket may provide a biological nudge towards sleep readiness. Instead of forcing sleep like a pill, the effect resembles a gentle adjustment, a small physiological reminder that it is time to settle down. Other evidence comes from the parasympathetic nervous system, the part that governs rest and digest functions. Several small studies show that deep, steady pressure is often followed by signs of parasympathetic dominance. Heart rate slows, breath deepens, and muscles relax. Monitors sometimes capture subtle improvements in heart rate variability, an indicator of resilience in the nervous system. For the person under the blanket, this effect shows up less as numbers and more as a felt shift. Shoulders unclenching, breathing more evenly, or energy gradually unwinding. These biological nudges don't have the magnitude of strong medication, and they shouldn't be described as universal outcomes. Dopamine, oxytocin, even endorphins may all play roles, but evidence for direct, consistent changes is limited. What we can say with modest confidence is that pressure creates the conditions under which those chemicals can adjust. The common theme is that heavier contact signals safety, and the nervous system responds by releasing markers of calm instead of stress hormones like cortisol. A useful analogy comes from human touch. A hug doesn't contain chemicals of its own, but it prompts the nervous system to release them. Weighted blankets appear to be an artificial version of this process, mechanical sensation transformed into biochemical response. This perspective helps explain why users often describe not just physical comfort, but also warmth, reassurance, or emotional stability. They are experiencing their body's chemistry, cued by external force rather than by a drug or supplement. Still, it's important to note the limitations. Most research so far relies on indirect measures: salivary melatonin samples, heart rate variability readouts, and subjective self-reports of anxiety or restlessness. Very few studies track neurotransmitters directly during use. And some controlled trials find improvements that are modest or only noticeable in certain groups, such as those with high pre-existing stress or clinical insomnia. This makes it clear that the effects are variable, from strong for some to barely perceptible for others. Even with those limits, the data trend consistently in one direction. Pressure may tilt the nervous system toward calm rather than agitation. The impact is measured in small degrees: slower breathing, steadier heart rhythm, more favorable sleep signals. But it's enough that many people can feel a difference over time. The actual dose is not chemical, but mechanical weight translated into neurochemical cues. Taken together, the picture is modest but meaningful. Weighted blankets don't deliver neurotransmitters directly, but they encourage the nervous system to produce them in more restful patterns. They belong to a different category than medication or placebo, physical tools that shape biology gently and indirectly. Such tools can be valuable in everyday life, especially for people who live at the edge of fatigue or stress. Short version: pressure can nudge the chemistry of calm in some people, but the effect is subtle and variable. And that leaves us with an important question. When people say they feel better under the weight, how much of that comes from biology, and how much from belief? The placebo puzzle. One major complication in studying weighted blankets isn't about whether people report liking them, but about how their results are measured. This is often referred to as the placebo puzzle. In clinical research, the gold standard is the placebo-controlled trial. One group receives the active treatment, while another receives something that looks identical but has no effect. With medication, creating a convincing placebo is relatively easy. A sugar pill can look the same as the real one. But with weighted blankets, the core feature is impossible to disguise. A 12-kilogram blanket feels different from a 3-kilogram version, and participants know the difference immediately. That awareness strips away the blind conditions that trials usually depend on. Because weight cannot be hidden, expectation becomes part of the experience from the start. Participants using the lighter blanket often assume they're not getting the real intervention, while those under the heavy one naturally anticipate results. That gap in expectation exerts influence before any physiological effect is measured. Stress, relaxation, and sleep are particularly susceptible to this psychological influence because belief alone can change how a person perceives their state. In fact, many interventions that involve sensation, heat packs, massage, or touch therapies, face a similar limitation. The physical component itself is noticeable, so placebo conditions are difficult to design convincingly. This difficulty shows up clearly in research data. Several randomized trials illustrate a consistent split. Subjective reports skew positive, while objective sleep measurements often do not. Participants frequently describe their nights as calmer, with fewer awakenings or reduced anxiety. Yet when examined by actigraphy, a method of tracking movement and sleep cycles, the results tell a more complicated story. Time spent awake after first falling asleep, or total sleep duration, may not show significant improvement compared to the control condition. A 2023 review highlighted this divergence, emphasizing that participants in weighted blanket groups often reported less severe insomnia and reduced anxiety, while actigraphy data showed little measurable change. This gap between what people say and what devices record is central to the placebo puzzle. Importantly, these self-reports should not be dismissed as irrelevant. Subjective improvement is still meaningful, especially for conditions where perception shapes daily life. For someone with insomnia, feeling like their night was more restorative can itself reduce fatigue and irritability the next day. Similarly, for anxiety, a lowered perception of hypervigilance translates into real-life improvements in mood and functioning. Even when expectation contributes, subjective relief can be clinically meaningful. In fact, patient-centered care often values self-reported quality of life as a key outcome. Weighted blankets seem to operate in this space. They improve how nights are experienced, even if the sleep cycle itself doesn't fundamentally shift. The psychology of anticipation helps explain this. Believing that a blanket will soothe the body can modulate stress pathways, decreasing cortisol, boosting endorphins, and even shifting how the brain pays attention to disruptions. This doesn't mean the effect is imaginary. Instead, it highlights how belief itself can alter physiology. For instance, a person expecting relief from anxiety may breathe more evenly and focus less on small discomforts, leading to an overall calmer state. The mechanism isn't only what the blanket does, it is also what the person's nervous system does in response to the belief in its effectiveness. Because of this, expectation is not best seen as a flaw, but as a multiplier. The weight may deliver some direct pressure-based calming effect, and belief enhances that benefit further. Many medical interventions work this way. Post-surgical patients who expect to recover with less pain often require fewer painkillers, even though their surgeries were identical. Likewise, weighted blankets may succeed not because pressure or placebo act separately, but because the two converge, pushing outcomes in the same direction. This also reframes how we evaluate placebo. People often use the term dismissively, as if placebo means fake. But placebo effects are among the most reliable findings in psychology and medicine. They demonstrate how perception and biology are intertwined. In the context of sleep and anxiety, areas where belief strongly matters, placebo outcomes are especially influential. If a person falls asleep faster because they believe they are in a calming environment, that benefit is real to them. Weighted blankets highlight this relationship because their defining feature cannot be hidden. The overlap between physical input and expectation makes them a near-perfect case study of how placebo and mechanism interact. Randomized studies reinforce this blurred line. In one trial focused on insomnia symptoms, people who used weighted blankets reported significant reductions in how severely they perceived their insomnia. Their anxiety and depressive symptoms also improved, compared with participants using lighter blankets. Yet when actigraphy measured the actual moments of wakefulness during the night, the results showed little to no improvement. The lived experience changed more than the data did. This reminds us that perception is not secondary. It is central to how people evaluate and manage their conditions. For this reason, the potential role of placebo should not discourage use. Instead, it should inform how the blanket is recommended and understood. If someone decides to try a weighted blanket, one practical approach is to treat it like an experiment. Try it in short sessions and track how you feel the next day. The metrics that matter are not only sleep graphs, but also self-reported stress levels, morning energy, or the general sense of calmness in bed. This framing puts expectation to work as part of the strategy, not as a flaw. It also reveals how comforts throughout history may have relied on similar dynamics. People have long used rituals, charms, or familiar bedtime objects, not because they had strong innate properties, but because they created stable expectations and a sense of safety. Weighted blankets occupy this very human tradition. They are marketed as physical products, but their power lies as much in psychology as in physics. The ritual of tucking in under a heavy cover becomes a signal to the brain. It's time to disengage and allow rest. Of course, this intertwined effect also complicates research. If objective metrics don't shift but participants feel better, it leaves open questions that may never be fully resolved. Without the possibility of creating a truly hidden placebo, weighted blanket studies cannot separate expectation from mechanism completely. But from the user's perspective, that distinction may not matter. Feeling rested or calmer the next day is the outcome most people want. If the pathway involves biology, belief, or both, the improvement is still valid. This is why the placebo puzzle isn't a dead end. It is a key part of the story. Weighted blankets may partially work by nudging neurochemistry, but they also work through belief and ritual. Rather than invalidating them, this makes them tools that combine psychological and physiological influence. The broader lesson is that tools can be effective even when their mechanisms are indirect. Still, it is worth noting that not everyone experiences these effects the same way. Some people find noticeable relief, while others report discomfort, restlessness, or no change at all. Placebo may amplify good experiences, but it cannot override mismatched physiology or personal preference. And that leads us to an important counterpoint. While many celebrate weighted blankets as calming, others find them far from comforting. When weighted blankets fail, weighted blankets are not a universal fit, and understanding why they sometimes fail is just as important as recognizing when they work. Their limitations can be grouped into three main areas: overheating, mismatched sensations of pressure, and inconsistent research outcomes across different populations. Each of these areas highlights the fact that a product often portrayed as universally soothing has boundaries that deserve careful attention. The first and most common issue is overheating. Adding extra weight to the body almost always means adding extra insulation. A blanket that presses down firmly will also trap more heat, especially in bedrooms that run warm or for individuals who already sleep hot. Night sweats, restless awakenings, and a general feeling of being overheated are frequent complaints from users in this category. Manufacturers now promote breathable fabrics like cotton or bamboo in an attempt to offset this problem. But even in those cases, the core problem remains. More weight means more mass around the body, which often leads to extra heat. For people especially sensitive to nighttime temperature changes, instead of soothing rest, the experience becomes an ongoing struggle to cool down. A second major issue is how the body interprets the sensation of weight. Deep pressure stimulation can calm many people, but not everyone processes that input as comfort. For some, the heaviness feels less like a hug and more like a physical barrier. Those with claustrophobic tendencies may experience a spike in anxiety under pressure. Others describe feeling unable to shift position freely, which can be particularly unsettling if they wake in the middle of the night. These sensations are not only psychological, they can also link to age, strength, or medical status. Older adults with limited mobility may struggle to push off a dense blanket if needed, creating safety concerns in situations such as disorientation or nocturnal confusion. Likewise, individuals with conditions that affect breathing, like obstructive sleep apnea or asthma, may find the weight across the chest intensifies their challenges. In these cases, what is framed as restful pressure can carry real risks. For this reason, medical guidance consistently includes clear caution points. Do not use weighted blankets with infants or unsupervised toddlers due to risk of suffocation or entrapment. And for adults, check with a clinician before use if you have respiratory conditions, circulatory problems, or difficulty moving independently. These warnings are not minor footnotes. They reflect real consequences that could turn a tool for comfort into a hazard. While most healthy adults will not face severe dangers, these exceptions are significant and underline the importance of tailoring recommendations to individual needs. Even when safety concerns are not present, individual body size and proportion matter. A blanket that is too heavy for a smaller person can feel crushing, leading to discomfort rather than calm. Standard rules of thumb, like choosing a blanket around 10% of body weight, are often cited, but many people fall outside these averages. Some feel better with less weight, others demand more. What works is not a precise formula, but an interaction between physiology, comfort preference, and environment. Marketing campaigns often gloss over this complexity, but it is central to why outcomes vary so widely across users. Finally, the scientific research paints a picture that is both promising and cautious. Subjective reports consistently suggest that many people feel calmer, less anxious, and more secure under weighted blankets. But when it comes to objective measurements, like sleep duration or the frequency of nighttime awakenings, the evidence is mixed. A randomized trial on children with autism, for example, found that caregivers and participants often preferred using weighted blankets. Families described them as comforting. Yet when researchers measured total sleep time or sleep onset latency, no significant differences appeared compared to standard blankets. This gap between preference and measurable improvement is a reminder that positive perceptions do not always align with physiological outcomes. This inconsistency is not limited to children. Studies across different groups, from adults with insomnia to individuals managing generalized anxiety, often show the same pattern. Participants rate nights under weighted blankets as subjectively better, while devices tracking movement and sleep cycles record little change in totals. These splits create both optimism and caution. Optimism, because feeling better is still valuable, especially when dealing with stress or anxiety. Caution, because the product is not a direct or guaranteed solution for measured sleep disorders. The distinction matters for users deciding whether to view a weighted blanket as a helpful tool or a comprehensive fix. Underlying all of these points is an idea psychologists sometimes call mismatch. Pressure is not universally translated as calming. Its meaning depends on context. For someone who associates steady weight with steadiness, the experience is soothing. For someone whose nervous system interprets weight as restriction or confinement, the same experience provokes stress. Neither reaction is wrong. They reflect natural differences in physiology, sensitivity, and prior experience. Weighted blankets cannot override these differences. Instead, they operate best when matched with the right user profile. Healthy adults who do not overheat easily, who have no respiratory limitations, and who like the sensation of firm, predictable contact. Recognizing these limits does not diminish the value of weighted blankets. In many ways, it strengthens it. When expectations shift from universal solution to optional tool, people can use the product more effectively. It becomes one method of self-regulation among many, to be tried, evaluated, and adopted only if it fits. That framing prevents disappointment, while allowing the experience of comfort to feel more authentic when it does occur. Used with caution, weighted blankets may offer reliable rest for some, but they also highlight an important reminder. What calms one body can unsettle another, and that contrast is key to their history. Weighted blankets began in settings where sensory profiles differ greatly, and they were originally adopted for therapeutic purposes before appearing in mainstream wellness spaces. Understanding where and why they first gained traction helps explain both their appeal and their limits in current use. The autism connection. Weighted blankets are most directly connected to autism therapy, where they were first explored as tools for managing sensory regulation rather than as household sleep aids. Occupational therapists introduced them as part of sensory integration programs, which aim to help children and adults organize and respond to overwhelming sensory input. For many autistic individuals, crowded environments, unpredictable noises, or even unexpected textures can create intense stress. In those moments, consistent deep pressure acts as counterbalance. A blanket that distributes steady weight across the body signals predictability, reducing the sense of chaos that sensory overload often creates. This strategy connects to a broader understanding of sensory sensitivities in autism. Many people on the spectrum describe touch not just as uncomfortable, but as unbearably erratic if it comes at the wrong intensity or from the wrong source. A weighted blanket provides the opposite: steady, controlled touch. That consistency can lower arousal and help restore focus. Clinicians often observed that when a child felt calmer physically, attention, participation, and sleep tended to improve. These early insights solidified the blanket as one tool in a larger therapeutic toolkit. The origins of weighted blanket design also drew on similar principles. Temple Grandin, a prominent autistic thinker, created a hug machine decades ago to help manage her own sensory responses. Later, Keith Zivalik developed a prototype weighted blanket after noticing his daughter sought comfort from a heavy beanie toy. His design circulated among educators and therapists who worked with children on the autism spectrum, where it was quickly recognized as fitting into existing sensory-focused strategies. Weighted vests, ball blankets, and compression garments all worked within the same principle: deliver predictable, grounding pressure to help regulate the nervous system. Blankets simply became one of the more practical options for home use, particularly at bedtime. Sleep is a key part of this story, since sleep problems are exceptionally common in children with autism. Long delays in falling asleep, frequent nighttime waking, and restless movements often strain both children and their families. Therapists and caregivers began noticing that incorporating heavy blankets into bedtime routines sometimes made transitions into sleep less combative. Rather than erasing sleep problems entirely, the added pressure appeared to shorten the resistance to settling down and eased pre-sleep anxiety. Scientific research, however, has produced a more nuanced picture. A 2014 randomized trial tested whether weighted blankets could objectively improve sleep for children with autism. The findings showed little measurable difference in total sleep duration or the time it took to fall asleep. But the children themselves showed a clear preference for the heavier blankets, and parents reported that nights felt calmer and less stressful. Later studies in the 2020s measured broader outcomes, such as anxiety reduction and willingness to remain in bed. Again, results showed that children and adolescents often described feeling more secure, with parents noticing smoother bedtime routines. Yet objective measures, like actigraphy readings, of total sleep minutes, often failed to confirm large improvements. This pattern has repeated consistently. Objective sleep data remains mixed, but subjective reports of comfort remain strong. Therapists summarize the evidence with a simple balance. Weighted blankets rarely transform sleep metrics on their own, but they very often change perceptions of nighttime regulation. As one review put it, therapists saw calming effects. Trials show caregivers and kids often prefer the blankets even when objective sleep improvements aren't large. This combination of subjective benefit and measurable limitations explains why weighted blankets hold a place in therapy without being prescribed as universal solutions. The key factor shaping whether weighted blankets help is individual sensory profile. Autism is a spectrum, and sensory experiences differ dramatically from one person to another. Some individuals seek out pressure and thrive under it, describing the feeling as grounding or even restorative. Others resist it, finding the sensation claustrophobic or intrusive. Because of this variability, occupational therapists emphasize personalization. Standard guidelines suggest using blankets at roughly 10% of body weight plus 1 or 2 pounds. But clinicians stress that comfort, independence, and safety matter more than strict formulas. Above all, the child must be able to remove the blanket on their own to avoid any risk of entrapment. This caution reflects the clinical consensus. Weighted blankets are not standalone solutions and are never recommended universally. They are one of several options, used alongside compression vests, joint compression activities, or even sensory swings. Each tool operates on the same principle of deep pressure stimulation, but no single method works for everyone. Families and therapists experiment, monitor responses, and adjust based on preference and outcome. That process, individualized, cautious, and collaborative, is at the heart of sensory integration work. One of the more important outcomes of this approach is how it reframes effectiveness. A blanket might not extend sleep duration on a monitor, but if it reduces bedtime struggles, anxiety, or resistance by even a small amount, it may significantly improve family routines. Parents often report that less pushback at bedtime creates a calmer household, even when the hours of sleep logged remain unchanged. In this way, weighted blankets are valued not only for their direct effects on the child's nervous system, but also for their indirect influence on relationships and daily stress levels in the home. The story of autism and weighted blankets also influenced their expansion beyond therapy. Families who used them in clinical contexts often informally tried them out themselves, discovering that they could feel calmer or fall asleep more smoothly under weight. Reports from these households slipped into wider conversations about sleep and wellness, eventually feeding into the mainstream marketing that positioned weighted blankets as stress relief tools for all. The path from therapy rooms to department stores was gradual, but without early adoption in autism care, the commercial leap may not have happened at all. Still, it is important to keep perspective. Within clinical practice today, weighted blankets are considered a modest intervention, valuable for some, unhelpful for others, and always in need of supervision and tailored guidance. They are never presented as treatments that can replace broader therapy or structured sleep interventions. Their role is supportive, meant to ease transitions, soften stress, and for some, provide an essential sense of constant contact in environments that often feel overwhelming. For caregivers who watch this research translate into everyday routines, the most practical advice is straightforward. If considering a weighted blanket for a child, consult an occupational therapist first. Ensure the weight is safe for the child's body size, ideally around that 10% guideline, and confirm that the child can remove it independently. Always monitor for signs of distress, restlessness, or overheating. These precautionary steps align with clinical best practice and help families discover whether the tool will be beneficial in their unique context. In the end, the Autism Connection demonstrates two key lessons. Steady pressure can sometimes provide powerful relief for sensory processing challenges, and what works in one body may not work in another. These insights, first highlighted in therapy for children on the spectrum, have since influenced how weighted blankets are understood and marketed more broadly. And as their use has expanded, a new focus has emerged, not just on sensory regulation, but on how these blankets intersect with some of the most pressing mental health concerns facing people today. The anxiety market explosion. Anxiety became the center of the story once weighted blankets left therapy rooms and entered wider consumer culture.